etc. And I finally got to the point, I says, no more, I'm not going to film anymore. I need to talk to Charles Manson and get things straight, who's the director, who's making the film, and whatever. And I was preparing myself for a big legal argument with Charles Manson, etc. And I sat down at the table with him across the table, Gypsy, Clem, Steve Grogan, and one of the lawyers. And Charlie looked at me and said, first he says, you got a cigarette? I gave him a cigarette. He looked into my eyes and he said, well, what's going on? And I said, and I started the legal argument. Well, the girls want to run the show, I'm the filmmaker. He said, whoa, 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 whoa. I think I can fix that. And he turned to Gypsy and he said, he's the filmmaker. You do what he says. And that was it. That was it, exactly.
And you had unprecedented access. Like, obviously, we're seeing an edited version here, but you shot a lot of footage. I know in more recent years you've put out extended, follow-up films with a lot of the outtake footage that wasn't used. You had really extensive access. There's a lot more footage than here.
Well, actually, what happened was because this is 16mm film, and of course, film is deteriorating. It's getting, turning pink, etc., like that. So about 20 years ago, we decided to transfer everything to beta high-speed tape. So the only way we thought of doing it was just mount up the reels in sequence. And so I did, and we had them transferred, and then it came out to about 5 hours or so, and or actually more, I'm sorry. And I said, my God, here's a whole movie in just the way I filmed it. So then we edited that down to about 5 hours, and it's still sitting there today, but we haven't added the sound effects or the narration, stuff like that. But then you can see the whole, the whole progression. But the only problem is, 5 hours is a lot of film. And today, yeah, especially, the Manson family, and for some people, for scholars, maybe it wouldn't get boring or whatever. So what I'm really trying to do is find out how in the world you can sell, 5 hours. Maybe some of you, would you get bored after 5? I mean, how do you do it?
Some other hands up out there, kind of towards the back in the middle. Yeah, you looking to your side.
I want to say this is, I want to credit you for an awesome work, especially for the 9th anniversary. This is very memorable. And I wanted to ask you, is there any, two questions, is there any way to access this online, a copy of this, or available on DVD anyway? And number two, your opinions of the other documentaries, like Charles Manson Superstar, have you seen those, or the Helter Skelter movie?
Yeah, well, first off, I sell DVDs. They're signed copies, and all you have to do is go to Amazon or eBay, and I have the original Manson here on DVD, of course, in original quality. It's transferred in, the color from the original, etc. And then I made another one called Inside the Manson Gang, which is my journey making this film, and which gives you more of a little hint. The 5-hour miniseries is still sitting in a vault, and maybe someday, I don't know.
Kickstarter.
Pardon me?
Is it available here at the theater tonight, or?
Oh, the DVD.
Did you bring DVDs to sell today?
No, I didn't. It's so much easier, on Amazon or eBay. But before I had to sue them, for selling the counterfeit copies.
Your reactions to like Charles Manson Superstar and the Helter Skelter movie, if you've seen those?
Well, Helter Skelter, that's actors.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the problem that you have when you're close to this thing. And when you see an actor do the same thing, it just doesn't. The actor is a compilation. In other words, he begins the movie being the bad guy, the devil, or whatever. He's created that character. And in real life, that's not how it actually happened. The Manson family was a loving family, and they did all the fun things and smoked a little dope, but everything was wonderful and that sort of thing. And it grew, it progressed. So it's very hard to have an actor do that, or a director, or whatever. That's my opinion anyway. Superstar, you have Charles Manson speaking, so at least you're listening to him. But here's the problem with Charles Manson. we're not sure he even knows the truth. I mean, you know, not just the drugs, but I mean, there's a whole, I don't want to say a cult following now, but scholars and everything that people are nitpicking and going through this whole episode thing. The Manson blog is one, and we're finding so many things that were never realized before. That, you know, the prosecution was a quickie thing thrown together. Even the whole motive, helter-skelter. I mean, there's so many holes in that. I mean, you know, you think about it, and I could just give you a couple examples, okay, where it makes it relevant today. So in the 5 hours that we have, we picked up all kinds of things. For instance, the word Islam is rising, Muslim, black Muslims, and Paul Watkins testified in court that the black Muslims, quote unquote, were the ones who were going to win the so-called helter-skelter. Well, who knows what a black Muslim is? Does anybody? You see, that's just one of those. Is it a Muslim who is black? Is it a black person who is Muslim? In prison, we know, and in the 5 hour, we know that Charles Manson was able to sit with the black Muslims and from the Nation of Islam. And that's where he picked up an awful lot of things. And we also know that at the time, and even to this day, the black against white, white against black, race war is in every single prison. And it's probably even worse than what helter-skelter would be like. I've seen documentaries where the prisoners talk about it, and it is what keeps the prison system such a hellhole. And then, of course, then you have the Latinos, the Mexican mafia, and then they're added into it. So,
and Charlie spending so much time growing up in juvenile halls and prisons was kind of ingrained in this kind of alternate kind of universe that didn't necessarily always translate into the outside.
I like to say it this way. If you learned anything in your 12 years of grade 6, or what is it, kindergarten through 12, if you learned anything, imagine Charles Manson went to his school in prison. And the people that he dealt with, he learned from, were everything from lawyers, murderers, Alvin Karpis. Alvin Karpis held the record for the most successful bank robberies. And then he merged with the Ma Barker gang. So, which is an interest, that even in itself, because Alvin treated the Ma Barker gang almost like Charlie Manson treated, the Manson girls. So there's just so many of these things that really relate to today.
Let's mention too, you had mentioned the back to the the availability of this film is it's been somewhat unavailable for years now. You have your DVDs available. It played, I think 3 years ago. You had some screenings at the other theater here in Los Angeles over at the Cine Family. But when the film first came out, it did make a bit of a splash. I mean, you were nominated for an Academy Award, 1973 Academy Awards for this. And then if you've seen the poster we have outside, that's the 75 re-release poster we have out there that puts more emphasis on Squeaky Fromme, after the attempted assassination of Ford. So you want to talk too. You had some free speech issues during that 75 reissue of the film because of the Squeaky Fromme kind of connection.
Right. Originally, let's call it an exploitation, a grade above movie distributor, American International Pictures, distributed the film, and it was just did mediocre business. They promoted it as a horror film, so to speak. And then I had a lawsuit with my co-producer, Lawrence Merrick, because I started the film and then he ran off with it. To make a long story short, I got the film back, won a lawsuit, got the film back from AIP, and we were re-releasing the film in 1975. We actually had Los Angeles booked in 75 movie theaters, worked citywide, and before it hit the screen, Lynette Squeaky Fromme attempted to assassinate President Ford. In one sense, yes, that made the film, brought some notoriety to the film, but then the judge, when he subpoenaed the film and they said, Well, if the public sees this film with Squeaky Fromm and the gun, etc., we'll never be able to get a fair trial and an impartial jury. So he banned the film, literally.
That was just in California, just in the state.
Well, here's the problem.
Posters say the banned in California.
Right.
Prominently added on the top of the
But
poster.
the problem is, if you advertise, if you play it in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and there's a newspaper ad, that newspaper is available at a newsstand in Northern California, and that's a violation of that order. So what happened is no theater would touch the film until the jury was selected. But just often, because this is relevant today, legally, the judge did a bad thing. And that's called prior restraint. He restrained a citizen, me, Robert Hendrickson, from distributing my film as an example of my free speech. So it says right in the order, his right to a free speech is set aside. That means, for instance, in the upcoming election, if a judge ordered Hillary Clinton not to vote in the next election, I guess that's okay. So you can see, so my right to free speech was set aside in Lynette Fromm's right to have a fair trial. But in true judicial fairness, you can't rule for something to be banned. You have to let let the bad thing happen. And in this case, if you can't give her a fair trial, then you can't try her. It's that simple. So I paid the price. Fortunately, when the film came out, somebody had the bright idea, just put a banner across the already made posters, say banned in California, and boy, that sure worked.
Higher protesters from
That worked.
Let's take some more questions. Wow, a lot of hands up all of a sudden.
She's right here, the girl.
There we go. There's one right there, Vanessa.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming down here on the anniversary and showing the film and stuff.
Thank you for the idea.
I'm curious.
Let me just say, all of these years, I've walked this thing across the country back and forth. Nobody ever thought of having the film shown on August 9th. So you must, I don't know who you are, but you're a weird guy.
I'm curious about your opinion on one thing. I mean, it seems like it seems pretty clear that Manson is guilty of conspiracy to murder when it comes to Gary Hinman, and it seems like he's guilty of conspiracy to murder when it comes to Shorty Shea, and it seems absolutely like he's guilty of conspiracy to murder when it comes to the La Biancas. But it is unclear, did he send the kids to CeeLo Drive, or did he not? Did they do it on his own and they told him after the fact? What is your opinion?
Well, first off, what the question he's raising is exactly the type of questions that are being raised all about this case backwards and forwards. And I don't want to veer from him, just for instance, there's now a documentary out, nobody really cares anymore, but who really had the Lindbergh baby kidnapped and killed? The father. I mean, it's conclusive. It's more convincing than, you know, so now, this is one of those situations, and for me, there was a couple of decades, I was just a filmmaker and didn't care about, but when I started studying the law and started seeing all of these different things, now there's lawyers that are, you know, realizing, oh my God, you know, there's a lot to be learned from this, you know, this type thing. So I'll tell you the classic example is a very famous case here, the Mendez case. They wanted to suppress a film that was coming out. That was the two brothers who killed their parents. They had no precedent. I called up one of the lawyers and they went, oh my God, there is a precedent. It actually was my case, went all the way to the Supreme Court. So of course, but then runs into some other legal technicalities called MONEY. And then, you know, they didn't pursue it. But it's like, boy, you start going, if the law if you had all the money to hire the best lawyer, nobody would ever get convicted. I mean, hardly. So, going back to what he said, that's one of the big ones. One of the big ones. They wrote Helter Skelter on Leno's living room wall. At the Tate House, they only wrote Pig. So, how do we do all of these things? And especially when there are certain words. Oh, I've dealt with this for a long time, but only in the last 20 years since I started checking. They wrote Rise on one of the walls in the LaBianca house. Only today, I happened to look up, Googled, Islam is rising. There's the word rise. They wrote Rise. It never made any sense. What was the rise for? Now, that wouldn't make any sense, of course, to anybody else, except you start adding Black Muslim. Then Sandy Good talks about Islam rising. And of course, when I try to mention some of this stuff on a blog or something, nobody, the sad thing is, everybody thinks the CIA is listening and watching. And as soon as that word Muslim or Black Muslim, Battle of Armageddon, that all comes up, then everybody gets scared. Let me tell you something. They can't spell those words. So don't worry about it. That's one of the things we're working on. We're trying to find why the Tate House. And of course, the prosecutor also said, hey, Terry Melcher, he was upset, Manson was upset because Terry wouldn't give him a recording contract. Well, boy, I think about it and I said, well, wait a minute. The Beach Boys recorded Never Learn Not to Love, okay? That was a Charles Manson song. So at least, he's starting out and he's, toward a writer or something like that. But did he really get that mad at Terry Melcher? That he would, and then you start going farther and you start saying, wait a minute. If Terry Melcher knew he didn't warn Roman Polanski when he rented him the house, hey, wait a minute. You think a crazy guy may do you some harm because you reneged on a recording contract, and you go and rent? Because he subleased it out. He left before left it. What's he thinking? You don't do things like that in the state of California now, or then you become liable. Then it comes out that later he was making love with the girls. Well, that could even accentuate, being mad, that type of thing. But you just start adding all of those things in, and like he said, this fellow said, hey, you've got him on the LaBiancas, you've got him on Shorty Shea, and another one. I'll give you a better one. Guess what? Leslie Van Houten had 3 trials. On the 3rd trial, because they had hung juries, a prosecutor got smart, because diminished capacity was going to be the defense, and she got hung juries. So all he had to do was charge her for another trial, robbery. Because when the robbery goes bad, you have the premeditation. There is no diminished capacity for robbery. And he won. Well, wait a minute. Leslie Van Houten was at the LaBianca house. So how could she be charged and convicted for robbery, and the others were convicted for Helter Skelter, the race war? So did one person have one motive and another person have a different motive? And then you could probably come up with 5 more motives. So this is, the point being, this is a case that, listen, you folks have filled the theater after 47 years. Think about that. And you're in a movie theater. But you're in a different percentile than the average person. You use the effort to get up on a Tuesday. And, I don't smell any grass in here, so you're all straight thinkers. Most except, well, because this case will drive you nuts after a while.
Yeah.
It really will. Exactly.
Let's take a couple final questions, I guess. You with the white shirt, put your hand up.
So, do you think that any of them have changed? Have you been in touch with anybody in the film in recent years?
A good question. Actually, when the film was over, my wife and I were subpoenaed in Sacramento for the Lynette grand jury indictment business and all of that. And wow, we were in the grand jury room, the judge, FBI, CIA, and all of that, waiting for Lynette Fromm to come down, and it finally got silent, and outside the room, on the marble floor, we could hear the chains dragging. And as the door opened, in came, looked to me like about 65 pounds of Lynette Squeaky Fromm, all chained as if, I mean, bin Laden wouldn't have had that many chains around him. And I said, hi. I went up to her and I said, hi, Squeak, how you doing? And she just looked right through me, practically. But she recognized me, and during the screening, they were watching, we had the screening on a videotape machine, and she just kept saying, she would do that, oh, I remember that, and she would turn to me, and then they would, they'd all look at, oh, yeah, that type thing. I went to the bathroom, and 3 FBI agents followed me into the bathroom during the film, and I just, wow, and I guess for the first time, after all, it really, wow, it's heavy. It really is heavy on the head, I guess.
Did you have any issues because of your involvement, filming this over a period of nearly 3 years or so? Did you have any issues after all this happened with either law enforcement kind of taking a closer look at you and keeping an eye on you, or as we see a lot of the Manson associates, once all this happened, the ones who had gotten out there was a certain amount of fear with some of those people that the remaining kind of family would harass them or give them problems. Did you have any issues after this from either side?
I'm still asking myself today, in all the filming I did in 3 years, no policeman ever came up to me and asked me a question about the Manson family. Although Merrick, he was talking to them, and that was not a good idea, at all. And you'd think somebody was good. But I think what really the problem was, they had Helter Skelter all set up from the beginning, and they decided to flow with it. And if I started, and people like you started asking these questions, and I started saying, well, yeah, you could, but it's the Sharon Tate thing, I don't think was Helter Skelter. Well, all of a sudden, now, how are you going to sell that? I mean, I am absolutely dumbfounded that Paul Watkins, who basically was the prosecution's star witness that explained Helter Skelter, he explained to the jury that, there'd be the race war and the black Muslims would rise up out of it. Wait a minute. Nobody asked the question, well, who are the black Muslims? Bugliosi just assumed, oh, they were all black people, just black people. But if you have to realize, we've seen the word Muslim in the newspaper every day. I guarantee you back in 1969, who ever heard of the word? So wouldn't you think the jury would at least ask, send a note back, what are the black Muslims? What are they? So you get into one of those things that, even in our society today, we're asking all of these questions. I mean, just the question about sacrifice, and Donald Trump got out of the service because he had something in his foot. People didn't ask those questions back then. I mean, we were just, I don't know, it was like, oh, wow, and they didn't even make good weed then. That was like real grass clippings. That's what it was.
Let's take one last question. We'll do
No CBD on.
Where is it? Yes.
This is a question not so much about the Manson family, but about the film. Jess Pomeroy, and the narration in the film is so compelling. It's so.
Jess Pearson, I think.
Oh, Jess Pearson.
Yeah.
Sorry. Bob Heard. Right. How did that get? I mean, it fits the movie so well. It feels like so much of its time, but it's also such a counterpoint to the the scariness of what's happening is this very soothing and very calming voice. I know he did like recordings with Rod McEwen and stuff like that. But what was your connection? Why him? Why did you use him?
He just auditioned.
Oh.
So, I mean, that sounds funny, but you know, what happens when you audition, somebody really can stand out and fits that bill, and you know, and it works in that sense, and that's a good example of it. You know, the music with the family, Paul Watkins, and that kind of fits too.
Absolutely.
Which would make sense. But I understand exactly what you're saying, because you know, you could spend a year trying to find the right narrative voice, so to speak, and I think it even still works today.
Yeah.
You know, it's not supposed to be overpowering. It's supposed to be subtle, but it's supposed to, you know, have all of those things. So. You know, I guess it worked out. And let me just add something here, because people have asked this. Merrick and I had a very contentious relationship, but yet at the same time, we agreed on things. And I think part of what the film that people are getting from the film is, he basically took over the Manson's a bad guy deal, and I took over all the opticals and film images of showing them as the loving Manson family. So what you have is a direct conflict bouncing back and forth and back and forth. And I don't know if it could have been done with any other way. In other words, we were almost battling. It would almost be like, oh, look at that double screen, you know, he made them look like just loving people and out nude and having a good time. Well, I'll add this, you know. And it works. I mean, it's that, like Pearson, but then we played with it a lot too, you know, and maybe changed things or whatever. So, you know, a lot of love went into this thing. I mean, I spent 3 years in it. Had some medical problems out of it, you know, that type thing, because hey, yeah, they're killers. I mean, if killing, like Charlie says, it doesn't even mean anything anymore, or crazy, you know, doesn't, but there was and I'm realizing today, there's a revolution went on and actually took place in America in the 1960s. I mean, we had the Black Panthers shooting it out in the streets, we had the Weathermen, we had the Charles Manson. I mean, if any of those things were to start taking place today, come on, you know, they have the artillery out tomorrow with them. Well, and now your police departments are armed with military weapons. So, you know, thank God we got a government, they're prepared, you know. They know if the wrong people want to take over the government, they will stop them. The only problem is, this time, we don't know who the bad guy is. The bad guy girls. You know, they're both, that's a little humor, but there's a lot of truth in that.
Do you have any final words you want to say before we wrap up?
I would just, how many people saw this film before tonight? Oh, not that many. So, can I just ask somebody why did you come to see this? What is the connection?
To see it projected in 35, you know.
But why Manson?
What was the attraction to seeing this documentary?
Gosh,
micro and macrocosm of mind control.
Yeah, and there's
military industrial complex.
And there's many people that believe he actually had this as he was an agent, and because at the time mind control was the most important achievement on the CIA's list. They were with LSD and everything else. So see, we don't even know. Maybe he was an agent. Who knows? You know. But it's what happens. So the whole idea is, when you're studying all of that, you're taking the time. What are you really doing? You're exercising the brain. I mean, you may learn things you really had no, you know, you really don't want to know, because there's a lot of ugly stuff out there. But I make it. This is a good way to end it. Good friend of mine was John Babcock. He was the director of ABC News in Los Angeles at the time. And we used to discuss every late Friday, we would talk on the phone, and because he was really into the Manson thing also. And we would discuss the relevance, etc. And he would say, you know what, the way I see it, They're just another military organization, the Manson family. That's how he saw it.
Okay, I want to thank all you guys for coming out and making a Tuesday night for Pastor Hans and the very well too. I want to thank Jeff and Dr. Hans for coming in. We're going to website and the rest of the community.
If you go to exclusivefilms.com, you can read, that's my website, you can see where to buy the stuff and all of that.
Thank you for coming out and thank you folks.